some beginners with Twickenham and maybe some beginners elsewhere, I'd like to just run over a few sort of not necessarily basic things, but things which might inspire people. And then I'm going to put together a couple of group plantings. One maybe straightforward, just to give the sort of rudiments of planting a group together and the do's and don'ts. And then we'll get on to the Celtic thing, which is what I do. What I've always loved to do is native species and try and simulate the things that I'm seeing in the mountains, on the coastal path here in Wales. Always spent a lot of time outdoors, always very influenced by, nature and the way that the weather impacts upon trees and all kinds of things. And I think it's the right thing to do. With this discipline of bonsai that we've got, it gives us a great chance to express ourselves individually. Um, if I teach anything, what I teach is technique. What I don't want to teach is image, because everybody's image of a tree is a very, very personal thing. Depends how you were brought up and where you were brought up. With me in Wales, I'm seeing a lot of wind-blown trees, a lot of dramatic images, if you want to put it that way. Whereas, we go to the heart of England. I work with the Warminster Club and Swindon Club and things like that. And what you see in there is people producing parkland images because that's what they've seen. And that's the beauty of what we can do. I always come from a point of view of making trees. Although, nothing wrong with buying a tree and looking after it is just a brilliant thing to do. But I think people have missed out if they don't what I call make trees. What I mean by that is we go out collecting, and what we'll be working with today, just a small larch for the evening workshop. No time to do massive trees, but even these little things that I collect can make wonderful little things. What I'm not going to do is spend an hour wiring, okay? Because you don't want to watch me wiring. If you want to know how to wire and we want a workshop on wire, we can arrange that by all means. And there are not many people in this country who wire well, believe me. We can all do with a lesson or two on it for sure. So what I've done over the past 2 days is I've wired up about 30 trees. So we're ready to roll, so to speak. And it can show you what we can do with material. Now, larch is an easy material to work with, but it doesn't mean that we can't do this type of thing with everything. So, for instance, this small little larch here, it's wired up. I just want to run through a few styles. Now, I don't like to impose style on people, as I've just said, and I don't like to stick to formal, upright, cascade and things like that. But let's just run through these things to give people who might not have that experience, the ability to see something being created. Hopefully I can do it justice as well. So this one, for instance, we'll start with creating a little bit of a formal upright. These have all been collected for at least a year. Good root system on them. Just about okay with the amount of budding that we've got. It can still work. So I'm looking for an informal upright, and we can move this to create that. The one thing when you're working like this, or when you're looking at books and looking at pictures, is it's very difficult to see the 3D thing, the perspective, because we do need that with bonsai. Whereas you can make a great 2D image in front of yourself, but what you're not seeing is the back to front as well. So when you see that movement there, when we see it from there, it's very flat at the moment. So we'll take it back and bring it forward as well, and then up. So we're getting that perspective as well. I'll be really doing most of the styling today on conifer trees, downward movement of the branches. Whereas if you're working with deciduous plants, always remember that you should be working with the plant, with the form of the tree, and a deciduous tree is going to be an upward movement. You know? And again, it's things like that we could do again. I'm trying to do as much as I can in the time that's available to me tonight. I know there's no real time limit, but we don't want to be here till midnight. So what we've produced there, just a little sweet informal upright with the apex coming towards you, and that's going to go in. Now I'm going to plant these quite roughly for the evening. Tomorrow they'll all be planted up properly. So this now, because bonsai is all about the tree in the pot and the image of the pot has got to complement the tree and vice versa. So for this little image, I'm going to go with the Dan Butler pot, one of our members, brilliant potter. If ever you want a potter at your club, give Dan a ring. He does a great workshop. He'll either do an evening, a day, or even a 2-day workshop. And he's great.
Chris, when
we've got a little informal upright.
Chris, can you bring it a little bit closer to the camera for us, please, slowly? And keep talking as well.
So, informal upright, movement to the side, movement to front and back, branches placed on outside of bends, and this is the skeleton of the tree. This will develop over the next 2 seasons into a very respectable little tree by ramification. Bonsai is all about ramification. It's as simple as that. This is the skeleton. This is where you start. So a nice balanced image, good pot for that tree. So an informal upright. Going to go with a bit of a semi-cascade this time. Again, these are the larch that I collect, all wired out and ready. So what I want to do with this now is a sort of semi-cascade thing. I've got some good movement in the trunk, so I haven't bothered putting heavy wire on the trunk. But what I want to do is bring the tree comfortably into the image. So this, coming up through here, the movement is going to continue. So I'm going to bring this down and through here. And you can see straight away the different levels. It's fingers over fingers, creating those levels. The more levels you can create, the better the image of an old tree. So it's coming around, coming into the trunk. If you think about a triangle that you put around the snooker balls or pool balls, when you're trying to create a tree, we generally look at a triangle. Now, the triangle depends on the size of the trunk. And, you know, a bigger tree would have a bigger triangle. But this one, we need a triangle of about this much here. That triangle could be formed here. But I'm going to form it sort of in this area here. Now, anything that we can't get comfortably into that triangle, we don't want. Simple as that, okay? So I'm going to just manipulate this a little bit more. So I'm bringing this branch down here, coming back on itself into the image again. This one will come down into here. So I'm starting to form this image in front of the trunk, which will then be in front of the pot. One of my pet hates is when you've got a a Cascade tree, and you've got the Cascade tree there and the pot on its own. What I like to see is the pot clouded, shrouded, clouded, whatever you want to say, on the pot. I'll show you that when we pot it now. So I've got this image here. I've got this as the bottom area, this coming up as an area above it, those fingers over fingers as we call it, another area on top of that, and another area on top of that, and then I've got this up here for my apex as well. So we're starting to form that type of thing. What I need to do now is shorten it. Never be afraid to cut your trees. A, they grow better, and B, you're going to get the shape and the balance that you want. Because if they're out of that triangle, out of that comfortableness with the trunk, it's never going to work. So that type of thing there. So we've got the movement of the trunk coming this way and flowing through down here, right? So again, to create the ultimate bonsai image, it goes into a pot. Just the right time of year to be doing all this with the latch. All these will be potted properly, as I say, tomorrow. I just want to show you what the type of thing you can do. And you can do this easy enough with garden centre stock. It doesn't have to be collected. And latch will take this all day long. I even do this through the summer months as well. Because I do so many workshops in a usual year, we can't fit them all in the winter. So I do quite a lot of this through the summer. And when I first started doing this in the summer months, I used to think that, you know, it was just, we'd have to sacrifice the trees, you know, for the sake of teaching people and doing these things. But they don't miss a beat, to be honest. They just keep going. As long as you look after them, you know, you've got to be aware of your aftercare, but these will take it all day long. Do you want me to bring it closer?
Yes, please, Chris. Because it takes the light out and we can see better.
Yeah. So the fingers over fingers, nice apex on it, a little bit of wood here to be dead, you know, carved out and through, all giving that image of a whole tree. So we've got an informal upright, and we've got a little bit of a semi-cascade.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Chris.
The other thing, yeah, go on.
Can I ask you a question that comes out of what you just said?
Yeah.
When I started about 20 years ago, there was a kind of general view that you shouldn't touch a larch's roots once the buds had burst. Now you're saying you can do it all through the summer, so which is right. Obviously,
well, we only find this out by experience, you know. When you listen to the old school, and don't get me wrong, I totally respect, you know, Craig Cousins and Dan Barton and everyone, but you know, we need to question these things, and we need to find our feet in Western bonsai, you know. And the first time we tried this, it was at we used to do the game fair as a club, you know, to put a show on, and this was in July. So I said, look, it's a 3-day show. What we'll do, I'll just take some of the older latch that I've had there for a while, and we'll just do a big group forest planting for the 3 days, wiring up and messing. But it encourages the public to talk to you, you know. And when we'd finished this forest on the end of the 3rd day, one of our club members said, he said, I'll buy that off you. And I said, well, Pete, you know, it might not live. Do you know, it's probably one of the best forests that we've created. It's an incredible thing. It didn't miss a beat. So all the way through now, you know, you can ask clubs that I go to regularly, And I'll do this all the way through the summer. And I'm not saying I'd put these out in full sun straight after this, but if you're sensible in what you do, not a problem. But these won't miss a beat, not a beat, you know. And the old school, you see, with larch, they would say that you let them extend and then you cut them back at the end of the season. Big problem, because they increase in their diameter and you start to get your tops of your trees like as thick as your thumb. You know, trim these all the time, feed heavy. You can trim these larch 2-3 times in a season, you know, maybe even 4. They'll take it. They love it, you know. So
Thanks, Chris. Thanks.
I understand where you're coming from. Yeah. Right. What I want to do with this
Chris?
one is show you the other type of thing that can give you more of an aged feeling to a tree. And that is what I call compression. Okay. So for instance, before we start, this is 8 inches high. Okay. Now, the more that we compress a tree and give it that small, what we call a sumo, this is not a sumo, we haven't got the trunk for a sumo, but you understand what I mean? We compress and we can get a lot of things happening in the tree, and we can create a very much older looking tree by this compression. So with this one, and this is going to be the pot for it, we're going to really go for this. Yeah, these are easy to do like this, but we can do this with all species. We can do it with acers, you know, different technique to do it, maybe slightly longer time frame. So all of a sudden we're straight down to 5 inches now. Okay. Now we're going to start to set branches. So this is my first bottom branch here. So remember what we're talking about is these fingers over fingers coming up through the tree. All right. Here's another branch, another branch, and another branch. One of the things we're always looking for is trunk line and taper. So if we go up through this tree now to here, which is the obvious top, which was the top, that hasn't got as much taper as coming into this. So I'm going to use this one here as the new apex, and I'm going to use this one as a branch, which would have been the, you know, the sort of obvious apex. So this now, more trunk line and taper going into it because it's thinner. Let me just turn him around a little minute, yeah. One of the beautiful things about working with certain people in this business, and certainly Pavel Slovak, is Pavel can design a tree from behind. So he can be at the back of the tree and design a fantastic tree while you're seeing the front. He's just superb at it. I just need to bring it round a little bit, I'm afraid. The other thing we've missed is Pavel over the last couple of March sessions. We usually have Pavel over every year, but he's been unable, obviously, to get through now. So we've come down now to a much squatter tree. Is that looking all right? Can you see where I am? And from 8 inches, we're down to 3 3/4. All right.
Question from someone.
So this is that compression thing. Again, what I want to do now is just bring the tree into where it should be. Never be afraid to cut. One of the biggest things you learn in bonsai is to cut.
Chris, I got a question from someone.
Go ahead.
From Tony Keatley, he's asking, Chris, what compost do you use?
Okay. Again, we could do a full evening on that, couldn't we? It depends. It depends on your lifestyle, if that makes sense. So if in the summer months you're in work 12 hours a day, you've got to think of moisture retention. You know, the best thing, the three elements you need. Andy Smith done a wonderful talk in our club for us about this last year. You need oxygen, you need drainage, and you need the ability for your plant to take up the nutrients that you're putting in. It's called the cationic exchange. Okay, so the best that we know of at the moment, which is accepted really, would be equal parts of pumice, lava rock, and akadama. So the lava rock is your drainage, the pumice is your oxygen and holding your water, and akadama is the best thing we know for the cationic exchange. In other words, the ability for the roots to take up the nutrients that you're putting in. I tend to err on the safety side with people who are not really keen. In other words, who don't want to water twice a day sometimes. Put some organic in, some of the horticultural bark, which is like 1 to 3 mil, which is wonderful stuff. You can put compost in. Compost is fantastic. You know, the horticultural trade doesn't use compost because it's no good. They use it because for them it's the best, you know. So compost is good, but be aware of your drainage. The stuff that I use, I don't know if you can see it, I'll bring it close. This is pumice, akadama, horticultural bark, molar, anything that gives you that free, look at that. Yeah, not John Innes and horticultural grit. That's gone. That's old school. So anything free draining, so long as you've got the ability for your trees to take up the nutrients as well. Little squat going into a little what you might think is a Japanese pot. It's actually a Chinese pot that I bought in a market in China before all this started. Again, I'll be potting these tomorrow properly, just to show that balance. So the 8-inch tree down to 3 3/4. Yeah. So we've got a little sort of compressed sumo. We've got a semi-cascade and a formal upright. Let's move on to something. Everyone's heard of Literarity. Way back in time in Japan, similar to the hippie revolution in Britain in the 60s, the literal and artistic people of the time were fed up with the regime. They didn't necessarily want a bloodbath, so they moved to the hills where they could continue with their writing and their painting and their poetry and everything, you know. And the literati, literal and artistic, and the way that they depicted a tree, and still do to this day in Japanese painting, is what we call the sweep of the brush. And it's just a lazy S with just a couple of things coming off it. And you'll hear literati banded about in architecture in all kinds of things. But when we talk about literati in bonsai, what it does, it gives us the ability to use a very, very thin trunk, still with some taper, but use it in a way which gives us a beautiful aesthetic finish. Now, literati is the least amount of branches that you will use in probably anything in bonsai. And it's a very simple technique, but I can make 10 literati one day, and if I'm lucky, one of them has got it. You know, it's a very difficult thing to get it right. But what we want is just that sweep of the brush with just a couple of branches coming off. Maybe a little bit of dead wood just sticking out the bottom, stuff like that can help. But the branches that we don't want to go in, the sweep of the brush is just a lazy movement into the thing. Back and forward as well. We don't just want 2D, we want 3D. And then these branches are just going to sweep down. This is one of the techniques where you don't have to worry too much about ramification, because you can over ramify a literarity tree. But obviously you need something, but you can overdo it. So just be aware of that. And when we talk about the less is more thing, then this is where you've got to be very aware of less is more. Because if you've got too much, as we'll see now, so what we've got there is quite an elegant tree, but for a literarity, there's too much. Okay? So the one that I'm certainly going to take away is going to be this branch here for two reasons. A, it's handlebarring with this branch, and B, it's coming off the inside of that bend. So I'm going to take that one away. There's 20 minutes of wiring wasted, but there we go. So now, and I've got, the other thing I've got then as well, is what I like very much is this offset triangle. Instead of the triangle coming to the flat here, it comes to here. With a very elegant trunk. And that, quite nice, I think. Again, I can make 10 of these in a day, and I might be happy with one, I might be happy with none. That one, luckily, has turned out to be not half bad. With a literarity, the classic pot is the small drum pot, very, very shallow. You know, this isn't going to work in a deep pot. Pot tree combination is vital here.
Chris, we can't quite see because of the light in the background. That's it. Nice. So if you stand in between the light and the tree, and
what do you want me to move?
Well, we can see it. Just come a bit closer.
Yeah.
And then if you just get in the way of the light. That's it. You got it. Right. Now talk.
Okay, so good. This is the literarity. Now it's going to go into its pot. I mean, is it better if I move forward or back, or?
Forward, so you can block out the light a little bit, because you can't see the shape of the trees until you bring them up.
Right. I'll have to move this one back a minute to get. That better?
Yeah, as long as you have to talk, Chris.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah, is that better?
Is that better for everybody?
A little bit. It's that light above your head is the one causing the glare, I think.
I know. If
the camera could be mounted, if the camera could be mounted higher, so we're looking down, you wouldn't get the reflection from the light across the windows at the back there. I don't know if that's.
Right, hang about. Let's see what I can do there.
As it is, the camera's lower than you, and it's looking up more at the light than it is at you.
Bear with me then. Going up. How are we there?
Well, that's better.
That's a bit better, yeah.
Yeah, that's better.
Maybe bend the camera just down just a very tiny bit.
Tell me.
Just down the camera down a little bit more.
Camera down a bit.
Yeah.
Tilt the camera forward rather than bring it down on height. Just tilt it forward. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's much better.
Is that better? Yeah?
Yeah.
Much better, yeah, much better.
Say
Yeah,
if
much
it's
better.
not. Good. So the Literarity now going into what you'd class as a sort of typical pot for a Literarity. I'm just taking some bigger taproot off there, not a problem. So this is going in. Tied down. Can everyone see that? Yeah? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's 4 done. We'll just go with the Cascade and then we'll get on with the group plantings. Cascade, it's so many cascades are made to and they look that they've been made, you know. To have a proper cascade, it should come out of the pot quite abruptly. And there's a couple of things against doing that. One is the pot, believe it or not, because if I wanted to cascade this tree in this pot, if I put it by there, I still haven't got that drop that I want. Can everyone see that? Yeah?
Yeah.
This is a pot, it's actually Mo made this from Bournemouth with the side cut out, right? What that gives me is the ability to place the tree at the right angle for a cascade. What we don't want, excuse the language, is the piss arch over. What we want is that drop of the tree coming out, and that gives it that ability. So just by producing pots like this, much easier to produce a cascade. So once you've got that angle, then you can work with the tree. I'm going to just tie it in a second so that I can manipulate it. So he's tied in, he's got a good entrance out of the pot at an angle which I can live with. And remember I said about this pet 8 of mine where you get the cascade here and a pot here, so they don't blend together. So this is going to move back over here so that it's with the pot. Relatively bigger tree than we've worked with just now. Again, thinking about the fingers over fingers. Creating the layers. Starting to get to where we need to be. It's coming out of the pot. It's crossing the pot instead of being a tree over there and a pot over here. My son has just turned up to see that everything's going all right. Yeah, we had to alter the angle a bit, but it's okay. Yeah. Again, you end up with stuff which you don't want when you actually get round to doing these things. Don't be afraid to cut off things that you're not going to use. Just makes everything that much easier and cleaner. So we're starting to get to where we want to be, or where I want to be. Just want to tidy up some of these branches into position. Some of them are said that you don't want when you get the trunk set. Don't be afraid to take them away. So we're getting somewhere like that. I can take another hour just playing with this and tweaking it and getting it exactly where I want it. It's just showing you what we can do. So that's our Cascade. Okay, so we can move on to some forest plantings. One thing when you're doing a forest planting, wire all your trees first. See, so many times that people put the trees together and then expect when they've got multiple trees all stood next to each other, they're wondering why they can't wire them, because physically it's virtually impossible. So everything for this little first group is wired up. What I want to do is just put a little bit of style into them, just again so I haven't got to put the style in when they're next to each other. We can tweak them by all means, but and cut a lot out, because when these get together then there's a lot of these branches that won't be needed. It's very difficult to envisage which branches they would be until they all get together and you decide where you want to be with them. Yeah? So we want branches on the outside of the group. We want the branches there. The branches in the middle, most of them are going to go. We want different heights. We want slightly different trunk diameters, but generally sort of the same. What we need is the smaller ones here are going to be the trees at the back to give us perspective. The main tree of a group should be the tallest, and it should be the prominent tree. Now that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the center of the tree of the group, because you could have a group hopefully that we'll produce next after this one where the main tree is on one side of it and gives direction. So, but it should be a prominent tree. I'm just putting shapes into them just to get them roughly where I want them. The other thing with a group, and again you see it so often when people produce a forest, that they're planted very